They said Donald Trump liked to inspect his hotels personally, that he trusted no one when it came to his brand, his name shining in gold letters above every entrance. That morning, Trump walked into the lobby of Trump International Hotel in Chicago like he owned not just the building but the air inside it. His black overcoat was perfectly tailored, his red tie a sharp line of aggression across his crisp white shirt, his shoes polished to the point of blinding anyone who dared look down. He moved through the space slowly, his sharp eyes scanning everything, every guest, every employee, every out-of-place item, as if he was hunting for weakness. And that's when he saw it. Or rather, saw him. Slumped in a leather chair near the window, an old man in filthy clothes sat clutching a cheap plastic cup of coffee like it was his last possession on earth. His jacket was torn at the shoulders, his pants stained, his shoes something you'd throw away after a flood, and that ridiculous blue knit cap jammed low over his head like he was trying to disappear. Trump stopped cold. His jaw clenched. This wasn't just an eyesore. This was contamination. This was an insult to the brand. He turned sharply to the hotel manager who was hovering nearby like a nervous child. "What the hell is that doing in my lobby?" Trump spat the words like they tasted bad. The manager stammered something about not knowing, about maybe security missed him, about maybe he was meeting someone. Trump didn't hear it. He was already stalking across the marble floor, each step hard enough to echo through the high ceiling. He loomed over the old man without warning, casting a shadow that swallowed him. "You," Trump barked, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "What are you doing here?" The man looked up slowly, his face calm, his gray eyes steady. He didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't move. It made Trump angrier. "This is not a shelter," Trump sneered, his lip curling. "This is a five-star hotel. You think you belong here? Who let you in?" The old man didn't answer immediately. He didn't beg. He didn't explain. He simply said, quietly, "I'm waiting for someone." Trump barked out a humorless laugh, loud enough that guests at the reception desk turned their heads. "You're waiting for someone? In here." He shook his head, disgust curling in his gut like a bad meal. "No. You're done waiting. Get out." He snapped his fingers, sharp and arrogant, and two security guards materialized at his side, big men in suits with cold eyes. "Throw him out," Trump ordered without looking at them. "Now." The guards moved in without hesitation. The old man stood slowly, taking his time, unafraid, which made Trump hate him even more. He picked up a battered backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and walked toward the door without a word. Trump watched him go, feeling a flush of satisfaction. He was cleaning house. He was protecting the image. No beggars. No losers. No charity. Not here. Not under his name. Not in his hotel. As the doors closed behind the man, Trump turned back to the manager. "Don't let that happen again," he snapped. "This place is supposed to be perfect." But the manager wasn't moving. He was pale, sweating. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Sir," he said, his voice tight, "that was Henry Hunt." Trump frowned. "Who?" "Henry Hunt," the manager repeated. "The most influential hotel critic in the country. He writes for World Hotel Review. He goes undercover." For a second, Trump didn't react. The name meant nothing to him. But then it clicked like a sledgehammer between the eyes. He had just kicked out the one man who could destroy his reputation with a single sentence. The man who could end a hotel's future with a paragraph. And he had done it himself. Personally. Publicly. And everyone in that lobby had watched. Trump's stomach twisted. But he didn't say a word. He just stood there, fist clenched, eyes burning toward the door where Henry Hunt had just walked out, wondering if it was already too late. The next morning, the headlines hit like a sledgehammer. "Trump kicks out famous critic disguised as homeless man," screamed one outlet. "Ruthless or reckless? Donald Trump's PR nightmare unfolds," read another. Within hours, the story had exploded across every major network. Social media flooded with videos from hotel guests who had filmed the entire confrontation. One clip showed Trump standing over Henry Hunt, jabbing a finger at him like he was garbage, his voice sharp, cruel, dehumanizing. Another angle caught the old man's face as he calmly picked up his bag, dignity intact even as the guards herded him out like a stray animal. And then there was the reaction shot. Dozens of guests staring in disbelief, their murmurs captured on audio. "Is that really Donald Trump? He's throwing him out? Does he know who that is?" The damage wasn't just done, it was multiplying by the minute. In his office at the top floor of the hotel, Trump stood staring at the television mounted on the wall. His jaw was tight, his arms crossed. The sound of his phone buzzing was constant, but he ignored it. He wasn't going to answer his PR team. Not yet. He wasn't going to answer the calls from his board. Not yet. Instead, he watched Henry Hunt being interviewed on Good Morning America. Hunt looked different now. Clean-shaven. Wearing a tailored suit. Calm. Polished. But his words were knives. I wanted to see how Trump's hotel treated people who didn't fit the image. I wanted to know if the five-star service was just for show. Hunt paused, his expression unreadable. I didn't expect to be thrown out by the man himself. But I'm not surprised. The host leaned in, clearly enjoying the scoop. What do you think this says about his hotels? Hunt didn't smile. They're beautiful on the outside. But if you don't look like you belong, they'll make sure you know it. Trump turned away from the screen, rage boiling in his chest. Get me his number, he barked at his assistant, who had been hovering nervously by the door. Now. But the assistant shook his head. Sir, he's not taking calls. From anyone. Trump swore under his breath. He paced the office like a caged animal, his mind racing. He didn't care about critics. Never had. But this was different. Hunt was famous in the industry. His reviews carried weight. Real weight. A single article could destroy bookings for months, years even. And worse, the story wasn't staying in the business pages. It was everywhere. Talk shows. Late-night monologues. Memes. Clips replaying over and over, Trump's face frozen in anger, his words looping. This is not a shelter. Get out. Someone had put it over dramatic music on TikTok. Millions of views already. Sir, the assistant said again, hesitating, there's more. Trump stopped pacing. More what? The reservation system. We're getting cancellations. The words hit like a gut punch. How many? The assistant's voice dropped. Hundreds. Some big events. They're pulling out. Weddings. Conferences. Celebrities. Trump clenched his fists so tight his knuckles went white. Fix it, he snapped. Discounts. Free nights. I don't care. Get them back. But the assistant didn't move. Sir, they're not asking for deals. They're saying they don't want to be associated. The room went silent except for the faint buzz of his phone, still lighting up with calls he wasn't going to take. Not yet. Trump strode to the window, staring down at the street below. Reporters were gathering. Protesters too. Signs waving. Not my hotel. Humanity over luxury. He turned back to the assistant. I want security doubled. No press in the lobby. Block them. The assistant nodded and disappeared. But Trump stood there, seething, realizing for the first time in years he wasn't in control of the story. Henry Hunt had made him look small. Cruel. Petty. And there wasn't a deal big enough to buy his way out of this one. Not yet. Maybe not. Ever.by http://ever.by. The third day, the storm had only intensified. What began as a scandal confined to the luxury hotel industry had spilled far beyond, catching the attention of everyday people who had never cared about five-star suites or Michelin-starred restaurants. Now, it was about something else entirely. It was about dignity. It was about how people are treated when no one thinks they matter. And Donald Trump, who built his empire on image, was watching it collapse by the hour. Inside the gilded conference room on the 25th floor of his flagship hotel, Trump sat at the head of a long polished table, staring down his senior executives. His face was flushed with anger, his jaw clenched tight. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector, cycling through slides of graphs and charts that all told the same story. Bookings had plummeted. Share prices were dipping. Several key investors were demanding meetings they never asked for before. The Trump name, once a magnet for exclusivity and status, was being dragged through the mud on every network, on every screen. And it all came back to that moment in the lobby. To that man. You're telling me, Trump finally said, his voice sharp, slicing through the thick silence, that one stupid review, has done this? His CFO, a man who had survived Trump's tirades for over a decade, cleared his throat. Sir, it's not just the review. It's the footage. The public doesn't care about stars or ratings. They care about how they feel when they see that video. Trump slammed his palm on the table, making some of the executives jump. They care because they're stupid. Weak. I did what anyone would do. He looked like a bum. You think any one of them would have let him stay? No one answered. Not because they disagreed, but because they knew better than to say anything. Another voice spoke up quietly from the far end of the table. Trump's head of PR, a woman he'd brought on 6 months earlier after firing her predecessor. The problem is they expect you to be better, she said. They believe you should be above that. Trump narrowed his eyes. I'm not above anything, he snapped. That's why I win. But even as he said it, there was something different in his tone. A hesitation. a flicker of doubt that he hadn't let anyone hear in years. There was a knock at the door. The assistant peeked in. "Sir," he said carefully, "Henry Hunt is on the line." Trump froze. The room froze. He stood slowly, smoothing his tie like it was just another day, another deal, and nodded. "Get out," he told the room. They filed out quickly, quietly, leaving him alone with the phone on the massive conference table. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he reached out and pressed the button. "Hunt." There was a pause. Then the voice came through, steady, measured. "Mr. Trump." Trump leaned back in his chair. "What do you want?" "You asked for the call," Hunt replied. "I assumed you wanted to apologize." Trump laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Apologize? You played me. You wanted a reaction. You got one. Congratulations." Hunt didn't flinch. "I didn't play you. I tested you. And you failed." There was silence on the line. Then Trump said, his voice tight, "What do you want?" "You can't fix this with money," Hunt said. "You can't erase what you did. But you can choose who you are after this. If you care." Trump snorted. "You think I care about what people like you think?" "No," Hunt said simply. "But you should care what you think when you look in the mirror." Trump's fingers drummed against the table. "You're not going to back off," he said. "No," Hunt answered. "I'm not. And neither are the people who saw what you did." Trump exhaled through his nose, staring out the window at the crowd below, bigger now than it was yesterday. "Then this is war." "No," Hunt said, almost softly. "It's just the truth." Trump ended the call without another word. He sat there for a long time, his mind racing, the city below blurring in his vision. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure what move to make next. And it wasn't because he had no options. It was because, for once, none of them felt like winning. The next morning, the protest crowd outside Trump International had swelled into the hundreds. Reporters lined the street, their cameras focused on the gleaming gold logo above the grand entrance, as if it might fall any second. Inside the hotel, the tension was thick enough to cut through. Guests were checking out early. Cancellations were rolling in faster than the staff could track. The lobby, once filled with quiet luxury and the faint scent of expensive cologne, now smelled like fear. Donald Trump stood behind the reception desk, glaring at the staff as if daring them to look away. "I want every guest who's still here treated like royalty," he barked. "If they want lobster at 2 in the morning, they get it. If they want a penthouse tour, they get that too. We're not losing another dime today." The staff nodded, moving faster than they had in months. But their faces said it all. They knew it was too late. Upstairs, in the presidential suite, Trump paced. His phone buzzed nonstop. His lawyer. His PR team. Another investor threatening to pull out. He swiped them all away. He didn't want lawyers. He didn't want advisors. He wanted control back. And the only way he knew how to get it was to hit back harder. He picked up his phone and opened Twitter. His thumbs hovered over the keys. But for the first time in his life, he hesitated. Anything he said now would be picked apart. Any lie would be exposed. Hunt had already made sure of that. And it wasn't just Hunt anymore. It was everyone. The doorman who quietly nodded to cameras on his way home. The housekeeper who told a reporter how Trump once screamed at her for leaving a smudge on his mirror. The manager who leaked the footage. The walls were closing in. He tossed the phone onto the marble counter with a loud clatter. He needed a different plan. And then there was a knock at the suite door. He froze for a second. Then he straightened his cuffs, ran a hand over his tie, and walked to the door. When he opened it, he found a hotel security guard standing there with an envelope in his hand. "This was delivered downstairs," the guard said quietly. "Addressed to you. Personally." Trump took the envelope and shut the door without a word. He stood there staring at it for a long minute before finally ripping it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Thick. Heavy. Expensive. It was from Henry Hunt. And it wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. Dinner. One night. No cameras. Just us. Trump's jaw clenched. The man was baiting him. Testing him again. But if there was one thing Trump hated more than losing, it was being underestimated. He wasn't going to be outplayed twice. He picked up his phone and called the number at the bottom of the page. "Hunt," came the familiar voice. "You want dinner?" Trump said flatly. "You got it. But don't think for a second this changes anything." "I don't," Hunt replied. "But maybe you will." Trump hung up without another word. That night, the restaurant was empty except for 2 men at a table near the back. No press. No security. Just a single waiter who knew better than to listen in. Henry Hunt sat across from Donald Trump, calm, composed, and not the least bit nervous. Trump studied him for a long moment before finally speaking. "You want me to apologize," Trump said. I want you to think about why you should, Hunt answered. Trump laughed once. I don't apologize. Ever. I know, Hunt said. But you should. Not because of me. Not because of the media. But because you crossed a line you can't uncross. Trump leaned back in his chair. You think if I say sorry, all this goes away? Hunt shook his head. No. But it's a start. Trump stared at him. For once, he wasn't sure if he was furious or fascinated. Hunt wasn't backing down. And somewhere deep down, maybe for the first time in his life, Trump wondered what it would feel like to admit he was wrong. He didn't say it. Not yet. But he didn't leave the table, either. The restaurant was silent, the kind of silence that made every small sound feel louder than it should. The scrape of Trump's knife against his plate, the soft pour of red wine into Hunt's glass. It wasn't a formal dinner. No staff hovering, no photographers peeking through windows. Just two men sitting across from each other, one with everything to lose, the other already having taken back control. Trump leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table in a move that made Hunt's brow lift slightly. You want to know why I threw you out, Trump said, his tone low, rougher now that the bravado was wearing thin. I saw you in that lobby, sitting on my couch like you belonged there. Ragged clothes, the smell, the stares from my guests. I built that place. People like you ruin it. Hunt didn't flinch. He set his glass down without drinking and watched Trump carefully. I wasn't there to ruin it, he replied. I was there to see if you'd built something worth recommending. A hotel is more than its chandelier, Trump. It's the people who work there. How they're treated. How you treat them. Trump scoffed. That's not what brings in the money. That's exactly what keeps it, Hunt shot back. Reputation, Trump. You built yours on gold towers and your name in lights. But one mistake, one show of who you really are, and you lose more than you ever earned. Trump leaned back again, but there was no satisfaction in it. His expression was tight, his jaw working hard behind the mask he usually wore in public. You think I care about one review? He asked. Hunt shrugged. I don't care if you care. But your investors do. Your future guests do. And those cameras outside? They're not going away. Trump fell silent. He knew it was true. Since the story broke, 3 high-profile events had been canceled at the hotel. 2 celebrities had moved their weddings elsewhere. A major investor, someone Trump had called a friend, publicly distanced himself, citing irreconcilable values. You're good at building walls, Hunt said quietly. But you're terrible at reading the room. For the first time, Trump didn't have a comeback. He stared at the table, his fingers tapping a slow, heavy rhythm on the wood. What do you want? He asked finally, his voice less sharp now, almost resigned. I don't want anything from you, Hunt said. I want something for the people who keep your empire running. The ones you ignored when you threw me out. Better wages. Respect. Basic decency. Trump's laugh was bitter. You think I'm running a charity? I think you're running out of options, Hunt answered. They sat in silence for a long time after that. When they finally left the restaurant, Trump didn't offer his hand, and Hunt didn't ask for it. But something had shifted. The next day, the headlines weren't about Trump's tantrums. They were about the sudden changes at Trump International. Raises for the cleaning staff. Improved benefits for the waiters and doormen. A public statement, not from Trump himself, but from his office, acknowledging a commitment to improving workplace conditions. The apology never came. But for the first time in his career, Trump had made concessions without being forced by a contract or a court. Hunt's review was published 2 weeks later. It wasn't glowing. It wasn't brutal. It was honest. A gilded palace learning humility, the headline read. And people noticed. Months passed. Trump International didn't recover overnight. Some damage can't be undone. But the employees stayed. New guests arrived. And slowly, painfully, the reputation of the hotel began to shift. As for Trump, he never spoke publicly about Henry Hunt again. But he never threw out another man for looking poor either. Sometimes the smallest moments are the ones that change everything. And sometimes the most powerful man in the room is the one no one sees coming.